Hi guys, welcome back to Geeks Wargaming. In this video I am going to be talking you through my recent experience at Throne of Skulls in Nottingham. For those of you who don't know, Throne of Skulls is a tournament run at Warhammer World. It is a Maelstrom, well this year it was a Maelstrom of War, straight out of Chapter Approved 2019. It is I'd say a semi-competitive tournament. It's not sort of a full ITC event or anything like that, as it does actually heavily focus on soft scores as well. So you get soft scores for people voting you as their favourite opponent, and you also get votes for favourite army, and that all gets sort of bundled in at the end, as well as your results in your game. And then the winner is determined from the overall soft scores and the game score. So you don't necessarily have to go 5-0 in the tournament to win it. You can actually win or come very close to the top, even by winning just 3 games if you've got very good soft scores. I actually prefer this style of tournament. I am somebody that, as you can see in front of you, I really enjoy the hobby side. The reason why I've been enjoying going to tournaments more recently is because I enjoy playing the game. I enjoy meeting people and playing the game with new opponents, new forces, and that's a good way to get access to new opponents and armies that you've never seen before. There's no better way than to go to a tournament and experience it there. So I'll definitely be going to more tournaments at Warhammer World. This is now my 2nd tournament at Warhammer World, and I think I am just going to do these from now on. Much prefer them from the ITC events. But yeah, ITC still got its place. So this is the army that I took, and yeah, so you've just all heard me about sort of, it's a slightly less competitive tournament and blah blah blah, and then I've got an Iron Hands list in front of you. Well, those of you who've been watching the channel know that Iron Hands is my army. It's the army that I've played for years and years and years. It was absolutely rubbish before, and it's now got very good. So kind of in a bit of a rock and a hard place. It's an army that I enjoy playing. I love playing with dreadnoughts because it's really fluffy in the Iron Hands, and things like your Tech Marine and everything like that. That's all sort of how the Iron Hands force works. And it just so happens that in this iteration of the codexes and the supplements, it's very, very strong. Which kind of puts me in two minds. I know that people aren't necessarily going to like playing against this, but I do enjoy using it. So I thought, well, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it to the tournament. It's not the most filthy Iron Hands list. It's a strong list. It's a strong list in that type of environment. It's probably one of the more competitive lists in that type of environment, but it's definitely not the sort of the meta list that we've been seeing. So the list consists of obviously everything that you see in front of you, which is a battalion and a vanguard detachment. In the battalion, I have a chapter master. So using the 2CP. Now, when I built this force, the tournament was 2 days after the Space Marine FAQ dropped. So I thought that because this tournament didn't require you to submit your list until the day, that the FAQ would actually be in force, but it wasn't. But I didn't know that when I was writing my list, so I actually tweaked my list to be more favourable in the FAQ scenario. So there's a few little things which I changed. Namely, I dropped the Ironstone. I think if you've got the half damage, the half damage stratagem that's now only 1 damage, and you can't stack it with the Ironstone. The Ironstone is not great anymore. I think it's still got its place, but I thought I'd give it a try without, see if I don't need that sort of crutch anymore. So I took the Tempered Helm on the Chapter Master. The Tempered Helm gives you CP back on a 5+. So there's my 2 HQ. Then the rest of the battalion, I've got 2 tactical marine squads, just with a missile launcher in, and then I have a 10-man intercessor squad, and in that squad the sergeant has a thunderhammer. Rounding out the battalion is 2 heavy support choices, which is the horrible Leviathan Dreadnought and the Contemptor Dreadnought with the 2 twin las cannons. I then have a Vanguard. The Vanguard has got a lieutenant and then the rest of the Dreadnoughts. So 2 Redemptors, an Ironclad and a Derrideo. The Derrideo is on the far right of the screen. It's very good at shooting. It's got a similar gun to the Ironclad. It's slightly more powerful, but not quite as many shots. So it's 8 shots, strength 8, 2 damage, and obviously if you're sitting heavy all the time, I think it's -2. So it's pretty good. You've also got 2 heavy bolters on it, and the little radar dish on the top is a conversion that I've done, and that is to represent the I think it's the automantic prevace, I think it's called, which basically gives anything that is wholly within 6 inches of it a 5+ invulnerable save. So I put that in the list because since the nerf to Pharos' ability, I just needed a little bit of extra protection for the Dreadnoughts that don't get an invulnerable save built in. So i.e. the 2 Redemptors and the Ironclad. So they kind of all buddy up together, and the other 2 can sort of go off where they need to. Now, because we were actually still using the old rules, I did actually have to sort of tweak my list by using some command points for extra relics, etc. So the lieutenant actually is carrying the Ironstone in this list. Not what I'd usually do. As I said, it would usually be on the Chapter Master. He's a little bit more resilient with I think he's got an extra wound, he's got the invulnerable save, that type of thing. So not an optimum choice, but I'd submitted my list with him as the bearer of the Tempered Helm, so I couldn't really do anything about it. I then spend another couple of CP to make the Leviathan a character, and then I give him the Warlord trait. I think it's the Iron Hands one. The name escapes me now, but it's the one that 6s to hit cause an additional hit. When he's got 20 shots, it's quite a lot of extra hits that you can actually get out of that, so that is quite effective. So that makes up the list. I start with 9 CP, and after I've done everything pre-game, I'm actually down to 5 CP. So with that, the Tempered Helm isn't really a great choice in this list because I've only got 5 opportunities to get the CP back anyway. So how this list kind of works is it kind of just walks up, sits in the middle of the table, shoots everything. If anything comes close to it, I've got the Redemptor, I've got 2 Redemptors, an Ironclad, and then some Intercessors, plus the characters that can hold their own in melee, and it's a sort of a 36 to 24 inch range is its optimum range. So if it's in the center of the board, it's basically reaching out and touching anything that's on the table, and it's just rate of fire supported with some fairly decent anti-tank from the missile launchers and also the las cannons on the Contemptor. So yeah, it's a strong list. I enjoy playing it, But let's move on to the games. So game one was against, lo and behold, another Iron Hands player. His list was fairly different from mine, but it had some of the things that you expect to see in an Iron Hands list. So he obviously had a Leviathan Dreadnought. He actually had two Leviathan Dreadnoughts. One was a character with a Warlord trait, same Warlord trait as mine, for the extra shots on sixes. Well, extra hits on sixes, sorry. 3 Thunderfire cannons, all the same characters as me, but he also had a Master of the Forge as well. And he had an Executioner tank. So the Master of the Forge allows you to hit on 2s. So he was sort of handing that buff out quite a lot. So yeah, that was kind of what you'd expect from Iron Hands. But then his troops choices were a little bit odd. So he had 2 squads of 5 scouts and a squad of incursors, which I've never seen anybody use before. So I wasn't really too sure what to expect. Turns out they're like, I don't know, not that great, I guess. Yeah, they just got like a bolter, a bit like a tactical marine, but 2 wounds and can sort of infiltrate. However, my opponent didn't use any of the infiltration, so I was a bit. I didn't quite understand why he'd got those in his list if he wasn't going to use that ability, because he could have actually sort of forward deployed and blocked my movement off slightly, which would have meant that it would have taken me longer to get in melee with his stuff, because how we use this is by moving forward, as I've said. So yeah, that was just basically a battle of attrition, really. So you know, I'd blow something up, he'd blow something up. And eventually I just managed to outscore him. So that game finished 14-13 to me on the Maelstrom objectives. So I won that. You get 6 points for a win. Then you get your secondaries, which are Warlord, Linebreaker and First Blood. So I got a maximum of 9 points out of that game. So moving on to game 2, I played against Blood Angels. So he had, his troops were all intercessors, Primaris Captain, Primaris Lieutenant, Ancient. He then had the Stormhawk Flyer, 5 Vanguard Veterans with Thunderhammer's Storm Shields, a Chaplain with Chaplain with Jump Pack. And he had a Bile Predator, a Predator Annihilator with all the las cannons, and rounding out the force, he had a Leviathan as well, with the Storm Cannon array. So I could sort of tell by looking at his army. And also, sorry, I forgot his other HQ, which was a Librarian Dreadnought. But looking at his army, I could tell that he was going to struggle to get through all of my armour. He did manage to go first, moved up with his Librarian Dreadnought very aggressively, tried to get a couple of smites on the Leviathan, did 1 mortal wound to the Leviathan, then tried to charge it, and with the combination of the Warlord trait and all the rerolls and everything like that, even in Overwatch, the Leviathan is absolutely terrifying. So I managed to kill the Librarian Dreadnought just to Overwatch fire, and on my turn then I basically blew up all of his anti-tank, and yeah, he couldn't really do anything then, so the game was pretty much over at that point. So it was just a case of sort of, you know, cleaning up units, scoring my Maelstrom, keeping the scoreboard ticking over in that way, and that's what I did. By turn 3, I managed to completely wipe out his entire army. So yeah, a bit of a mismatch for him, but you know, nice opponent. Very into the game, very into the army. So you know, good fun game anyway. That then takes me on to game 3, so the last game of the first day, and I'm drawn on table 1, which I've never been on table 1 before. I presume it still has the same sort of the same sort of standing as it would in an ITC. So the person on table 1, the two opponents on table 1 are first and second. So yeah, I was a little bit apprehensive actually, moving up to that table. And when I got there, there was a rather nasty towel list with all the what they're called, ripties, is it? No, ripties. I can't remember. The big towel stuff that does all the damage with all the drones and all that. You know the towel meta list. So I thought, oh, that's going to cause me some problems. Don't really want to play that, but hey, let's see how we do. But then the owner of that army turned up and took it off the table and wandered a couple of tables down because he had just lost on that table. I was then met by my opponent. I can't remember anybody's name, so apologies if you're watching. You were all really great opponents. I just can't remember your names, and I didn't write them down, unfortunately. So his force was 3 knights and some reinforcements of AdMech. His knights were, I think he had a paladin, a warden, and a crusader. His warlord was the crusader, and I went first, blew up his warlord on turn 1 and heavily damaged the warden. He then, with Landstrider and full tilt and everything like that, managed to charge my line with one of his knights on his turn 1, but didn't really do any damage. I think he killed a few tactical marines because the way that I'd deployed meant that that's all he could do. And then I shot that off the table and shot the other knight off the table in my turn 2, and it was just a case of mopping up all of his force. So by turn 3, he just basically said to me, look, I'm not going to be able to do anything, you're going to be able to destroy this, this, and this. So we agreed just to sort of call it there. So at the end of day 1, I've won 3 games. 2 were tables, and 1 was I'd destroyed 1,500 points of my opponent's army. So quite decisive wins, all 3 of them, scoring maximum points on all 3 as well. So I'm feeling pretty good by that time in terms of where I am. Did feel for my opponents. I think all of them, all but the first match were sort of slight mismatches really against this force, but I knew going into day 2 I was going to face something quite nasty potentially. Yeah, that's basically exactly what I got. So first game of day 2, I play against Imperial Fists, which is probably one of the hardest matchups that the Iron Hands can have, just because of the amount of damage to shots and the volume of fire and all the buffs that they get for shooting at vehicles and everything like that. It just sort of everything was against me. We did say before we even sort of rolled any dice that this game was going to go down to a coin toss basically, so whoever went first was winning, and unfortunately I went second in this game. And in turn 1 was absolutely brutal. His force consisted of 3 Redemptors, 2 of the Forge World Sicarian tanks with the Gatlers, which do 18 shots. He had the Master of the Forge, Chapter Master, Lieutenant, all those type of buffing characters that you see in Space Marine lists. And then he had Stalker Bolter, Intercessors, an Impulsor, and a couple of Stalkers. So yeah, that was a little bit of a surprise in the list, but yeah, still scary list. As I said, he went first, and in his first turn, with all the fire that I received, even with using Ironstone on the Leviathan and half in damage on one of my Redemptors. He managed to kill a Redemptor, take another Redemptor down to half, kill the Ironclad, kill the Derrideo, and killed the Contemptor Dreadnought. So basically I have the Leviathan and a half damaged Redemptor, and then just all my infantry. So I knew at that point that the game was over. But responded pretty well. Managed to kill one of his tanks and a dreadnought in my first turn, but just not enough. I just didn't have enough damage to sort of weather another round of fire and then respond. So I managed to I think I've managed to drag it out to turn 4, but all I'd managed to score was first blood in that game, and I got tabled in that one. And that game just goes to sort of show that even with the FAQ, and meaning that armies like Iron Hands and Imperial Fists can't use heavy Devastator Doctrine for more than one turn, they do all their damage in the first turn anyway, so it's not going to do anything really. So I think these types of lists are still going to be there, they're still going to be powerful. So Games Workshop do need to do something to tone them down even more, and it kind of makes me a little bit sick to say that, but the worst thing you can have is your opponent not enjoying playing against you. You can tell from their face straight away. If you have a good round of fire and you take off half their army on the first turn, they know they've lost. It's just a case of, what can they get out of it, and most people don't like playing that. I know, I've been on the receiving end of that myself, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's it's nothing I can really do. It's not really fun. May as well just stop now. You kind of feel like in some cases, but that's the way the game is at the moment, so you kind of have to work around it. So yeah, that was my first loss of the tournament. So moving into the final game, I've moved down to table 4. And I'm against Genestealer Cult, which was the only Genestealer Cult player out of all, I think it was 88 players in the tournament, I think it was. I've not actually had that much experience against Genestealer Cult, so I was a little bit unsure how to play things. I knew that obviously they were going to deep strike in and they were going to wrap all my dreadnoughts, so I tried to bubble wrap with as much as I could. The way that my opponent deployed as well, he gave me first turn and then deployed in a way that he had characters out of line of sight of me, and then he had a blob of aberrants that were quite close to me, but he played a stratagem which means you can't target them, so technically I didn't have anything that I could shoot because everything else was sort of deep strike, all just hidden. So yeah, it was a little bit of a, oh okay, so it's my first turn and I can't do anything. We then have the sort of 2 or 3 turns worth of him charging into my line, tagging some of my shooty dreadnoughts, me trying to fight out of it, moving away from him, and it was just a bit of a battle of attrition really. I was getting some quite favourable cards on the Maelstrom, so I managed to score everything on my side of the table, which led me to just sort of keep moving forward, which meant that I was leaving behind some of the things which he was attempting to charge me with, and also then enabled me to just shoot them because they weren't then tied up in combat or I wasn't tagged anymore. So I think we got to turn 4, and he had a handful of characters on the table and a couple of squads of infantry, so we sort of talked it out and both agreed that by the end of turn 4 he'd have nothing on the table, so we sort of called it there. But it was a very sort of close game. It was quite backwards and forth in terms of the stratagems and the cards that were coming out. It was always sort of within 1 or 2 points until about the 4th turn, where I had a very good hand that I could have just outscored him even if I hadn't have sort of taken him off the table. But a very good opponent. He knew his positioning well, managing to sort of tie up my dreadnought and tag all dreadnoughts and things like that. So yeah, really good. I also found out how devastating the sniper characters are in Gene Stealer Cult. There's the one that's the Wild West man with all the arms, with all the guns in. He had a couple of those, and they were just terrifying. So they basically shredded through my lieutenant on the first turn, and then my chapter master on the second turn, and took Ferios down to 1 wound on the third turn. The only thing that kept him alive was his 5 up feel no pains, which I managed to make a few of. So yeah, they're quite scary. So if you come against them, you need to make sure that they die, because they're pretty scary. They're squishy if you can shoot them, but they do a horrendous amount of shots. So yeah, that was the sort of the end of the tournament. So out of the 5 games played, I've won 4. Then it's just basically over to the sort of the award ceremony. Now, as I said at the start of the video, Throne of Skulls isn't just about sort of winning your games. Soft scores also are taken into account. I think it's as much as 50% of your overall score is from your soft scores. So I managed to get my 4 wins. I got 1 favourite gamer vote, and then I got 2 favourite armies, which put me 16th overall in the standings, which I was pretty happy with. It was kind of a bit higher than I was actually expecting. Before going into the tournament, when I obviously at the end of day 1, I was thinking, oh, actually, this if things go right on day 2, I could be in sort of the the top 5 here, but it didn't pan out that way. But yeah, well happy with 16th out of the amount of people that were there. But it has, my experience there and seeing how my opponents were reacting to my army. I love this army. My opponents don't love this army. Obviously, all the hype and the negativity that's been online about Iron Hands for the right reasons has just made everyone. As soon as you see Black Space Marines, it's like, no, don't want to play it. It's horrible. Get it out of my face. So with that in mind, I've sort of decided that I am not going to be using this army in tournaments going forward for the foreseeable future. I'll still use it in battles against Richard, because he deserves to die. But yeah, I'm going to be taking another army to Throne of Skulls and team tournaments going forward, because that's what I plan on doing. I'm going to the team tournament at Warhammer World in April, and I'm going to be taking my Craft World Eldar there. So hopefully, Eldar won't put people off. I know. In previous editions, that's a bit of an ironic thing to say, because nobody liked playing Eldar, but I don't think they're as bad anymore. So, as long as I've got an army that I can win a few games, have a few good close games, and people enjoy playing against me and like the look of my army, then I think that's what's key really at Throne of Skulls. So overall, very, very enjoyable tournament. I'd recommend it to anybody that is thinking about going. Maybe you're just sort of thinking, I haven't done a tournament before. Which one should I go to? I'd definitely recommend going to a Warhammer World one rather than an ITC one. ITC ones, obviously, they have their place, but they are a lot more competitive. You come across some very competitive lists, and you will get shot off the table and completely annihilated quite quickly if you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, I'd suggest Throne of Skulls, because you see some really outlandish lists, and the mid to bottom tables is where it's at in Throne of Skulls, I'd say. So yeah. Anyway, I've rambled on for more than long enough. So hopefully you enjoyed the video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy the video, why don't drop us a like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Throw us a comment down below as well. What do you think? Should I retire this list? What would you do? Or would you continue using it despite people not liking it? What further changes do you think you need to make to Iron Hands to actually make them less of this boogeyman list that nobody wants to play, without making them as underpowered as they used to be? So yeah, leave us some comments below. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.